Yeehaw! Larken here, doing a Facebook Live thing. About FEDS, SPIES, and infiltrators. Actually going to talk... Oh, well, I'll get to that in a second. Actually going to talk about the sort of chess game that every ruling class, it does its propaganda and it trains its citizens to be good, easily extorted subjects. And then it has to deal with the occasional, uppity resistors or people who speak out against it or, dissenters or whatever. And so every government, of course, deals with that and spends money and has personnel and has resources devoted to what do we do about the people who are trying not to obey us. And that's true of every regime everywhere. And to pretend it wouldn't be true of the U.S. is silly. And so when they get caught, spending a bunch of money on propaganda and stuff, and they have spies in social media that are doing these, fake comments to give a pro-government slant to everything, when people are surprised by that, it surprises me that anybody's ever surprised by that. Like, you have people with a massive amount of power that depends upon the obedience of the subject class. To think that they wouldn't do that sort of thing is ridiculous. I mean, even just a company that sells widgets does that sort of thing. Like, is there anybody in our company who's working against the goals of what we're trying to do? If they're, if our employees are out there like selling secrets to somebody else, or if they're out there bad-mouthing our product, or if they're sitting around on the job not getting anything done, like, of course, any operation is going to be trying to further its own goals, and in the case of government, that's the forcible subjugation of mankind. So one of the things they're going to be working against is anybody trying to stop them from subjugating mankind. So of course they do that, and of course the U.S. government does it. And there's always all these conspiracy things of, they infiltrated they infiltrated this, that, the other thing, the Black Panthers, and the FBI sent these things to Martin Luther King trying to get him to kill himself, and all these revelations. And to me, the thing that most surprises me is that anybody was surprised by that. Like, the amount of power and influence and money at stake here in the hands of people who obviously don't mind causing wars. Like, they don't mind mass death used to enrich and empower themselves, which means they don't mind anything used. Like, there's no more moral code to expect them to abide by when they will all the way kill people for their own power. As every government will do, by the way, since every one of their laws is a threat of violence. It's backed by a threat of deadly force. Because if a law was, you must do this unless you just decide not to, like, that's not a law. So, of course, every government can and will resort to the use of deadly force to uphold its own power. So to be surprised that it does underhanded, sneaky things is just sort of ridiculous. But I want to talk about something that has to be sort of, it's funny to me how frustrating it must be for the psychos in power to try to deal with it. Because, like, let's say, there's some militia group or something that's, like, planning on blowing up a building or something. That's a strategic, tactical thing that people in government can, like, spy on and infiltrate and find out. Never mind that usually when you hear about them, it's the government doing it themselves. Let's say there was actually a group trying to do that. We're mad, we're going to blow something up. Like, in that case, the government agents have something to work against, and they can feel like the good guys. Here's these malcontent criminals trying to blow something up. And in that case, the feds could actually be, theoretically, the good guys if they're stopping innocent people from being harmed. Again, this is a hypothetical. It doesn't actually happen this way very often, if ever. But at least in that setting, and like that's the sort of thing you see in movies and TV shows of there's some evil, violent group trying to kill a bunch of innocent people because they don't like government. Like, well, how do you get from one to the other? I don't know, whatever. But if there is actually such a group, then the people in government can feel in the right and righteous, because these are bad guys about to hurt innocent people. Good, they should be stopped if they're going to do that. And can have a tactical plan of, okay, we're going to infiltrate them, we're going to stop them, we're going to surround them. There's brute force, there's spying on them, there's all these sneaky things. It's easy to know what to do to go against that. That's what governments do. and the whole espionage and spying and infiltrating thing that they always do all over the place to all sorts of groups fits with that. And every government does that. Everything from the nastiest tyrannies in history to even the most mellow, boring, something on the other side of the world. They're not even bothering to do warmongering, but they still have to keep an eye out for any, people starting to organize to resist them, to refuse to pay taxes or to refuse to obey some stupid law or whatever. Of course they're going to do that. They're an organization whose goal is the subjugation and exploitation of mankind. Of course they're going to try to do things to stop people from resisting that. Duh. But what strikes me as so funny is for all the like plots and schemes and things that they can try to look into, the thing I focus on and the thing a bunch of you focus on, and that whole endeavor, it's so funny to think of them trying to counter that. Like, what do you counter it with when people they're not even like planning some physical reaction, they're not planning an overthrow, they're not blowing something up, they're not like organizing into some violent thing. Now there are a bunch of specific illegal organized things that I totally morally support. Like people figuring out ways to network and trade beyond the reach and beyond the eyes of the parasite class, if they're, whether it's whether they're just doing the agorism routine of we just trade over here and maybe not even using currency, maybe not even using any currency, maybe using something other than what FEDS use, maybe using Bitcoin, maybe, whatever. If people are actually trying to build networks to sneak under the radar of the parasite class, I'm all in favor of that. That's perfectly moral. You don't have an obligation to be robbed by a bunch of lying crooks. However, at least that gives the feds a target to aim at. Like, oh, they're trying to not be robbed, those horrible people. We're going to infiltrate and spy on them and try to pester these people to give over the records about those people, and that they can have a plan of operations, a plan of attack against people in an organized manner trying not to be robbed. As soon as there's sort of a centralized, organized thing, well, there's something for the tyrants to go after. And again, I'm all in favor of a bunch of things like that. I don't do that myself. That's just not my thing. But it's funny trying to imagine what the feds are trying to do against what I actually do. And obviously, they're going to be trying to do something. But when somebody's just out there expressing ideas and explaining the concepts of self-ownership and non-aggression, like, a zillion of you are too, whatever else you might do. Let's say you're the control freak tyrant high up in government, and you're like, we have to crack down on these people. And you have a bunch of underlings. Now, you can't just rely on all your underlings to be completely immoral, evil imbeciles. Like, you have a number of them that will do whatever you say no matter what. But they're still humans, for the most part, beneath you. Those humans can be persuaded that they're the good guys if they're going after terrorists, or even if they're going after tax cheats who didn't pay their fair share. But you can't just tell all your underlings, well, there are these people over there who are advocating a purely nonviolent, voluntary society, go get them. Because, a lot of, even devout order-obeying statists, even a bunch of them are going to be like, wait, go get them for what? First of all, there's nothing illegal about doing that. And second of all, there's obviously nothing immoral about expressing the way they wish the world was. What are we doing? So immediately they have to resort to nasty, deceptive, completely unjustifiable stuff. Unlike if you're going after somebody it's some terrorists who want to blow up a building or something. Like, there are justifiable, rational things you can do to try to stop somebody from blowing up a building. There's nothing justifiable and rational and moral you can do to try to stop someone from going out and saying, I think we should have a voluntary society. Like, to try to interfere with that in any way is immediately immoral and bogus. But also, how do you do that? Because the whole infiltrate and spying on people routine is something that it works in the settings of, some organization trying to pull off something, whether it's something immoral or moral, whatever it is, some central plan they're trying to achieve. But what's the point of infiltrating people who are already publicly saying what they want, and their entire agenda is publicly saying what they want. Like, we're going to spy on them in order to what? Hear them saying in private what they say in public anyway? Which is one of the reasons I don't particularly care. You know, people say, I bet the feds are spying on you, and I almost hope they are in a bunch of cases because, okay, I'll say the same thing in private. Not that it wouldn't be bogus and immoral and illegal and a few other things, but like, I say the same thing in private I do in public. So what good would spying do? You can't, there's nothing to infiltrate when there's no plan of action other than expressing ideas so the rest of the world can understand it. So that's when you have to go to slander or having your own puppet, like plant somebody who pretends to be on their side and then tries to botch things up or make people look bad from the inside. About the most intelligent thing they could do, and I don't think they actually deserve credit for when this happens, is get government plants out there to pretend to be voluntarists and anarchists and then have them start to spew stupid statist garbage. Now, you may think of some names that match that description of people who pretend to be anarchists and then turn around and spew statist garbage. I don't think very many of them are actually government plants. I think they're just people who are emotional and want attention and get scared of stuff. I can't say that for sure, but that's about the best the government could do. But that doesn't work either. Like, it's basically you go in and it might confuse a few people and throw a few people off track, but it doesn't end the message to have somebody go and say, I believe in peaceful coexistence and voluntary interaction, and then the next day say, and let's kill all the people who look like this. Like, all the people who understood the message up to that point are going to say, wait, no, you just went completely overboard, heck with you. And that's mostly what happened to when people have done that and got scared and drifted over to fascism, is, yeah, a few scared boneheads may have followed them, but most people just said, no, that's not what I believe. And that, I would be totally ashamed if the people who follow me and like what I do still followed me if tomorrow I came out and decided to be a fascist. It's like, if it's that easy, if you're just believing it because what I said, then you're just an imbecile. If you believe it because you already understand it and you make the truth your own and you just sort of like the way I say it, or you think I make it understandable or something, but it's still your truth, it's not blind faith in me, then cool. But if you're like, it would be, I've almost thought of doing like short little tests of that on occasion, of come out and spout something stupid and statist, just to see how many people will totally turn on me and say, wow, you just betrayed the truth, so heck with you. Because that's what I hope everybody would do. Like, I don't want anybody... Now, the nicest thing I could say is, I hope a bunch of people would go, wait a minute, you can't possibly have meant that. Like, really? Did you just... Are you having a bad day or something? Or did that just sound wrong? Like, so maybe a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, if I say something that suddenly didn't match anything I've ever said for the last 20 years. But if anybody just suddenly went, well, now I'm going to be fascist because Larken's fascist, like, that would be the biggest indication of a complete failure of what I've been doing for the last 20 years, is if people decided to believe me instead of the actual principles that I try to explain. That being the case, if you look from the government's perspective of how do you infiltrate this, how do you defeat this, other than trying to demonize and slander individuals or just intimidate them or kill them or whatever, like there's hardly anything they can do, and they actually have to be careful about exposing their own agents to these ideas. I did a talk called Monitor This, Fascists, a while back, saying, I wish every Fed would listen to my talks and speeches and spy on me and find out what I'm saying, because then at least a few of them would go, oh, holy smokes, that kind of makes sense, and maybe I'm not always the good guy. And so infiltrating that doesn't do any good. So it's sort of, it's convenient that so far in this country, at least, we'll see if the Orange Führer changes this. So far in this country, they don't just lock you up for saying, I don't actually want a ruling class, and I think interaction should be voluntary. And so it's funny to think of them trying to come up with a strategy of how do we infiltrate these scary? Because I'm completely anti-government, and I have no respect for the law. I've said that over and over again. I don't hide that fact. I'm also totally in favor of the non-aggression principle, regardless of badges, and that's regardless in either direction. I don't want somebody. I'm going to go blow up a government building. Well, no, that's immoral if there's any chance of anyone innocent getting harmed, which there's going to be if you're blowing up a building. And never mind that it wouldn't do any good anyway. But it's immoral and ineffective. So it doesn't. So what's to infiltrate? What do you do about it? And the funny thing is, one indication to me that those in power are desperate and are losing is that they don't even really try to give a counter to the ideas, other than, well, we'll demonize them and try to make them look bad and slander and do whatever else. But it's not like, all right, we're going to go out there and get a message explaining why voluntary, nonviolent interaction is bad and the violent subjugation of mankind is good. I mean, that's it's built into the indoctrination, it's built in the mainstream media, but they don't even really bother trying to address it philosophically because they can't. And there's not really anything to say other than feeding garbage to young people and putting it in the mainstream media so people are exposed to it over and over again. And so they don't even really try. Now it's just well, we're big and bad, and if you disobey us, we'll stomp on you. And the thing is, that's a good sign, because when a government gets to the point where it's resorting to just brute force to get compliance, that's always temporary. You can't maintain a stable, long-term regime by brute force alone if your subjects don't feel an obligation to obey. So fewer and fewer people are believing in an obligation to obey, and government isn't doing anything to fix that. Whoa! Sudden flashback to my adventures with a federal extortion racket. And we did these letter writing campaigns to ask about, hey, this is what your laws actually say. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And I don't need to get into the details because they're irrelevant here. But it was Pamela Olson. Oh man, there's so much about that. Oh, that ridiculous thing. She pretended to be, was she taxpayer advocate or some ridiculously titled position that pretends to be keeping the IRS in check or something. And she actually said in the public speech, it's been shown that fear of getting punished isn't nearly as good at causing tax compliance as people feeling an obligation to pay. I was like, yeah, no kidding. And the funny thing is, I then had, it was at least 100, it may have been several hundred people, send her the letters with a few simple questions about the actual law and how do we comply with this, and said, thank you so much for saying that, and I look forward to you, living out what you're saying by, instead of threatening and stomping on people, explain to them why they actually owe this. Explain to them the answers to these questions of how to determine what they owe. And this was a legal issue. It had nothing to do with the philosophical thing that taxation is always bogus, regardless of what their scribbles say. But it was a perfect opportunity to show what a total hypocrite she is by sending these letters, and she immediately freaked out and ran away and didn't answer any of them, and they were, threatening, and, you better not, that's frivolous, and we're going to stomp on you. And it's like, okay. But it was funny that she acknowledged that if people don't feel an obligation to obey, threatening them and hitting them and stuff isn't really going to gain long-term compliance. And that's true in general of governments as well. If people don't feel an obligation to obey, yeah, when your thugs are right there in front of them, they'll probably do what you say to avoid getting killed. And the moment your thugs turn their backs, they'll be doing anything they can to get around the tentacles of your giant parasitic beast. So in this case, how do you infiltrate that? There's nothing to do, and that's so funny to me that it's a chess move to which there isn't really a response, other than we'll try to demonize individuals. Well, even if you succeed in that didn't do anything to the principles. Every once in a while, somebody might go, oh, well, I guess they killed that guy, or they bribed that guy, or they made that guy look bad, or whatever. But the principles are still the principles. Like, how many people do you know who, accept and embrace the concept of self-ownership or non-aggression or voluntarism or however you want to describe it, and then some voluntarist does something bad and go, oh, well, in that case, I'm going to be a fascist. Like, it doesn't work that way. When it's the principles that they're actually paying attention to and attached to, going after individuals doesn't even really do anything, even if you're just making stuff up or knocking people off. And I've said before, you know, if they were going to knock me off, they should have done it a long time ago, because at this point it would just get me more attention. Wouldn't help me much. I'd be slightly dead at the time, but it wouldn't help them at all. So they should have paid more attention and knocked me off like 25 years ago or something. But here, let me see if I can actually get to where I can see comments to respond to, because that was the general point of the whole thing of, oh, we're being spied on. It's like, well, if I'm being spied on in something I'm trying to say publicly, there sort of isn't anything. Oh, my description is too long, and it's not letting me even see the comments as long as I'm here. Oh, let me say this. Oh, duh, I totally forgot to say this. There are now 3 Candles in the Dark seminars that are scheduled. And I was going to say for the rest of today, because I need some money quick to transfer over to this to pay off of that. For the rest of today, a ticket for the 2-day thing, which includes lunch both days, will be $100. Normally it's $115. You can do it by PayPal or Bitcoin. I gave the addresses in the description under this. July 15th and 16th, there's one in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. That's at the southern edge of New Hampshire. It's just a little bit south of Keene on July 15 and 16. August 12th and 13th out in Marysville, Washington. It's a little bit north of Seattle. That's Washington State, not Mordor. And then on September 23rd and 24th in Denver, Colorado. So if you want, just until midnight tonight, if you want a ticket to any of those, I showed where to send stuff to PayPal or to Bitcoin to get them for $100 each. It's a 2-day thing. It's broken into 5 segments. Oh, somewhere I'll post a link to the video that talks all about it. Don't really need to get into explaining that all over again, but I thought I'd quick throw out that deal just right now until midnight Eastern time tonight, Thursday, whatever this is, June 1st. So, unfortunately, I would respond to comments, but apparently it isn't letting me see comments because my description was too long, and I don't know what to do about it. So maybe I'm not responding to comments, or maybe I'll close this and immediately start a new one and respond to comments. I will do that. Ready, go. I'm going to reappear here in 2 seconds just to confuse everybody.